When should I do this, Ryan?
What?
Begin.
You should begin right now.
Right now. History happened everywhere. A random place, a random time, and a topic pulled from the hat. The challenge is to find the fascinating, uncover the unexpected, and share the stories. You're listening to...
History happened everywhere.
Hello, you're listening to History Happened Everywhere. I'm Pete Goddard. I'm here in the studio with the mighty Ryan Weir.
Hello, everyone.
Ryan, you have a beard, correct?
I do, yes.
But I've also known you without a beard.
Really?
Yeah.
That must have been a long time.
It was a long time.
How long have we known each other?
10, 15, 30 years. No, you've had not a beard and various forms of beard in the time I've known you.
True, yes.
And I had a question for you. I've never really bearded.
No.
When you shave, you go from bearded to non-bearded.
Yeah.
Do you, A, shave it all off,
Yes.
or B, go through various beard stylings to see how they look before you get right back to nothing?
Is this a gentle way of asking if I've ever done a Hitler moustache?
Well, I mean, that was going to be one of the sub-questions, yes. I was more like, do you kind of go, I'm going to try a Wolverine and then a full moustache, or then go down to a pencil moustache, an Errol Flynn, a soul patch? What's the order?
The answer is yes, 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 and yes. Whenever I've had to do it. And even sometimes just when I'm just maintaining this beard, I will still shave extra little bits off just to see what it would look like.
My personal favourite for you, is, which I think you pull off well, is a sort of Elizabethan gent.
Yeah, Three Musketeers look.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think you're one of the few people I know who could pull off a ruff.
So on my brother's stag do, we went to Vienna, and there is a stand there where you can dress up in oldie-worldy clothes and have your photo taken using oldie-worldy cameras.
See, I've seen Western versions of those where you dress up like a cavalryman or something.
Exactly. Well, this one was sort of Edwardian, and so we were given top hats.
Sort of Sherlock Holmes-y type stuff.
Exactly, yeah. And honestly, I felt more comfortable wearing that.
Did you find out you should have been
at the picture and
an
thought,
Edwardian?
Why didn't I live then? So like, if there was an equivalent, like, what would yours be?
So I have always had an affinity for the hippie movement of the 1960s in America.
Okay, so sort of bell-bottom jeans and...
leather fringed waistcoats and all of that, paisley and patterns, love it.
I don't see that. I see the Flintstones with you.
I could rock a bear skin.
Yeah. You'd make a good Barney Rubble.
I'd be a terrible Barney. I might be a Wilma. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. What we're here to talk about is, well, what is it?
Well, I don't know. I've forgotten as well.
We can always look it up. Let's look it up.
Okay, I'll hit the button. So let's switch it on. Okay, we're up and running.
Okay, Ryan, are you ready? Your country is Ireland.
Oh, nice.
Your time period is the Age of Imperialism.
Okay, then I guess I just need a topic.
And the topic is...
fingers crossed.
Mountain.
Mountain.
Yeah, like those
like
mountains.
all the
Just
mountains
one that
in...
Dublin's on.
All the Irish mountains.
All those Irish mountains.
Okay, so, all right. So our next episode will be mountains in Ireland during 1800 to 1914. All right, I'll do it.
I look forward to seeing what you make of it. So, mountainous Ireland.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm assuming. But I'm willing to find out, I'm hopefully. I have my suspicions that may have been challenging, but I'm coming into this with an open mind, Ryan, so off you go.
Yeah, I was super nervous when I got that one. I thought, well, what on earth? Are there mountains? Because I know from within, the UK, there's Ben Nevis, there's Snowdon, people talk about Scafell Pike and the Three Peaks. No one really talks about the mountains in Ireland. But first, We are talking St. Patrick's Day. We're talking the colour green. We're talking top of the morning and leprechauns having the crack. River dancing, kissing the Blarney Stone. Liam Neeson, Brendan Gleeson, potatoes, soda bread, and of course, the black stuff. Ebony nectar, a pint of plain. That's right, Guinness. Because we're in the Emerald Isle. We're in Ireland.
So one of the big challenges is trying to get through without accidentally trying to do the accent, isn't it?
It's going to happen at some point, and I'm so sorry to anyone listening. Before we start, how about we have a nice glass of Guinness? How do you fancy that?
I love a Guinness. I would be delighted.
All right, well, while the music's playing, I'll just get one. Diddly diddly dee, diddly dee, diddly dee.
Okay, well, what do we have here?
I'm back.
This is different to what I was expecting, I have to tell you.
Yeah, this is the Guinness West Indies Porter, which is an original recipe from 1801, which just so happens to be within our time period.
Excellent.
Right at the start of it, in fact. So
let's have a pour.
Let's have a pour and a drink. Right, there we go. Well, that's
right.
Good. Okay, so what we say is we raise our glasses up high and we say, Sláinte.
Sláinte.
The taste of 1801 Ireland right there.
That's delicious. I remember when I first tried Guinness and I thought it was horrible, but times have changed.
Okay, so yeah, we're in the Emerald Isle. We're in Ireland, which is funny because it is an island in the North Atlantic, just west of Great Britain. It covers 5/6 of the island. The Republic of Ireland is an independent nation and a member of the EU. The remaining part of Ireland, that final sixth, is in the north. It's Northern Ireland, and it's a territory considered by some to be part of the United Kingdom.
Sort by controversial.
Indeed. But we're talking about the Republic of Ireland. It's 84,000 square kilometres, which is 8 islands in a France.
Okay, I had a feeling that it was smaller than that, but that's a pretty decent size.
Yeah. It is largely low-lying, lovely, beautiful, scenic, picturesque fields and rivers that lend themselves more to farming more than anything else.
I guess they call it the Emerald Isle for a reason.
Very, very beautiful. It has a population of 5 million as of 2020, yet 40 million Americans with Irish ancestry.
It's a particularly American thing as well, isn't it, to describe yourself as Irish? Maybe several generations back, but it tends to stick.
And we'll perhaps come to the reason why in the history section of this coming up. A quarter of the population, so just over 1 million people living in just the capital city of Dublin. Irish is the official language, which is very similar to sort of Scottish Gaelic. All official documents are written both in Irish and in English as well. The Irish language sort of decreased in use over time, but it's still today more widely read, spoken and understood than during most of the 20th century. So it's not dead by any means.
Something of a revival.
They have a national anthem. Do you want to hear it?
I definitely do, and I'm hoping it's not what I've got going on in my head, which is a really stereotypical Irish jig.
Dang it. No, here's the national anthem. I wish it was. No, I got the wrong one. That's the wrong track. This is the national anthem. It's called The Soldier's Song.
Oh, I like it. It's got a straight from the opening.
But if I played it, you wouldn't instantly think Ireland, would you?
I would not, no.
Needs more fiddle. It's quite joyful, though.
Yeah, this has definitely got a happy march towards the future feel about it. I want to join in.
Slows a bit down a bit there.
Dear. Take it to the bridge. Oh, nice. I like this one. This is in my top 10.
Top 10
sure.
of national anthems.
Yeah. If you were to say, I'm going to pop a national anthem on, this would definitely be a positive reception. I love the end. That was great.
That's a really good one, isn't it? Yeah, I thought you'd like that one.
And we should probably explain to those people who are unaware of the previous piece of music that it was the opening music for Father Ted, a absolutely top draw comedy program from the 90s, I want to say.
Yeah.
If you've not seen it, do yourself a favour, Google it and start watching it today.
Yeah, if you've not seen Father Ted, you are missing out.
Dougal, Do you remember Sister Assumpta?
No.
She was here last year. And then we stayed with her in the convent back in Kildare. Do you remember it?
You do.
And then you were hit by the car when you went down to the shops for the paper. You must remember all that. And then you won £100 with your lottery card.
You must remember it, Dougal.
And weren't you accidentally arrested for shoplifting? Or maybe we had to go down to the police station to get you. And the police station went on fire? And you had to be rescued by helicopter?
Do you remember? You can't remember any of that? Huh? The helicopter. When you fell out of the helicopter. Over the zoo. Do you remember the tigers? You don't remember? You were wearing your blue jumper.
Sister Assumpta, hello there.
Okay, island facts.
I'm scared.
Island facts. Why did you get scared by my facts?
I don't know. I just do.
Okay, 1959.
Yes.
A lion was used by MGM movie studio in the opening clip for its movies.
Oh, yes.
You know the one they made?
I'm familiar with the lion. Kevin, or whatever his name was.
Sure. Well, that lion was born in Dublin Zoo.
Oh, wow.
It was an Irish lion.
Oh, you could tell because it's roar, our Irish roar.
Dracula was Irish.
No way.
Well, no, not really. Bram Stoker was Irish. He was the author of Dracula. So I like to think that Dracula was Irish.
Well, I mean, on the subject of Ireland, literary greats aplenty. Oscar Wilde, James Joyce.
Sam Beckett. Those are some pretty good, strong ones.
That's high up in the pantheon, aren't they?
Yeah. Let's talk about Sean's Bar in Athlone. Is supposedly the oldest pub in the world.
Wow.
Yeah, dates back to 900 CE.
Wow.
Yeah, so let's raise a glass to that. Sláinte.
Sláinte.
Let's talk about the Irish flag. Do you know the colours?
Green, orange / sunlight. I don't know what colour we call it. And white, I think.
Sunlight.
I don't know. The sun. Orange. Let's go back to orange.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. The Irish flag is green, white, and orange stripes. It was designed in 1848, so within our time period, by a group of French women.
French women?
You weren't expecting that, were you? No. And they supported the Irish cause against the English. It was intended to symbolise the Irish Catholics, which was the green, and the Irish Protestants, the orange, sharing a lasting truce, which is the white.
Ah.
Like a
Oh,
handshake
that's interesting. I
between the
did not
two.
realise that.
I know. Every time you look at it now, you'll see it.
I am, yeah.
you'll see the two
That's
groups of
actually,
people.
of all the flags, there's always assigning colours. I mean, this is the fertility of the land and stuff.
Yeah.
That's the best one
Or
yet,
the
I think.
blood of war.
Well, yes, or the murdered savages.
Right. Yeah. No, but it's a really interesting one. I'd never really considered it before, but there you go. Also, you'll notice it's very similar to the French flag, just different colours
Yeah.
in the way that it's laid out. So there you go. French women. Let's talk about some history.
Okay.
Irish history. Okay.
I don't think we're going to come out well, speaking as a British person, from this next section, but I think we should face into it.
Hold on to your hats. Okay, 6000 BCE. Guess who's there?
Early man.
Early man is there, but it's quite late, isn't it? 6000 BCE. You'd think it would go back further than that, but
But he had to travel. It's more or less the edge, isn't it, of the sort of migratory routes.
So 6000 is BCE is the earliest, and those were hunter fishers, not hunter gatherers, hunter fishers. They're described as, yeah, and they're the people that first appear.
I like that idea that someone's gone, I'm going to go gathering that. No, that's not what we do.
You just don't get us, do you? 3000 BCE, we have Stone Age burial chambers being built, rectangular timber-built houses, where you're inside we found beads and pendants, bone pins, and these really elaborate engravings on the walls, which are beautiful to look at. Really recommend having a look. In fact, I'll put a link up in the notes to this episode. They're also similar in style to those being built in northern France, indicating a possible origin these guys had migrated from.
So I suppose there's only really two routes. You could have come down from Norway, Scandinavia, Scotland, or up from southern Europe, because if you go west, there's not a lot of anything for quite a long way, is there?
Quite a long way, yeah, exactly. So 1000 BCE, we enter sort of the metal age. We've got bronze, copper, and gold, and they're all being exported to Britain and the Nordics. as well from Ireland. So 300 BCE, the Iron Age brings about the arrival of the Celts, who I figured would have been those original people, but they're not. They're a group that originated from East Central Europe. Kingdoms and clans are then established as these guys sort of duke it out over a long period of time. In fact, it's not until the 10th century that Ireland has one king. 200 CE, the absence of the Romans in England caused the Irish to feel confident enough to start raiding England, and so they come on into Britain and they start settling along the west coast along there. 400 CE, the first signs of Christianity in Ireland, and by 600 CE there are the first reports of Saint Patrick, who converts the Irish to Christianity. He's now their national saint. There is a relatively comprehensive monastic system put in place around that time, with most men sort of dedicating their lives to the faith as either monks or as missionaries. And by 795, we're seeing the Vikings arrive. And when they arrive, they are raiding the country.
That's classic Vikings.
They love a bit of a pillage.
Right.
But only for 100 years. By 900 CE, they've kind of abandoned their raids and they're now just trading. By 1166, and for the next 500 years, is the first period of English rule. The country is divided into counties, and English laws are starting to be enacted. There are frequent rebellions throughout this period, which are put down severely. In 1652, a young lad called Oliver Cromwell, leads a campaign, and he crushes all resistance, and Ireland is officially conquered. All territory is given to English soldiers and creditors. Irish landowners are left with nothing.
Yeah, I think Oliver Cromwell, certainly when I was younger being taught history, they really skipped over the bit where he was quite such a merciless brutalist in Ireland and really focused on democracy. And Oliver Cromwell has an extraordinarily dark cloud over him in matters Irish. And when I learned about it later, I was rather disappointed that it hadn't been made clearer to me when I was younger.
It's not talked about. It's sort of perhaps referenced briefly, but like you say, the focus is more on the politics. Yeah, so 1791, we see an insurrectionist group known as the Society of United Irishmen being created, and they are sort of driven by the success of the American and the French revolutions, and that starts to influence their own desire for reform in Ireland. And in 1798, a rebellion breaks out. Unfortunately, that is suppressed, and the British government uses that as an opportunity to tighten its grip. And in fact, the Act of Union is signed at this point, which makes Ireland part of the United Kingdom. So that turns us into our time period, the 1800s, and we start to see sort of the effects of the Industrial Revolution on Ireland. The value of Irish agriculture drops because of the innovations that were happening because of the Industrial Revolution, and the rural communities are really hit hard. In fact, the poverty that they were going through is made worse in 1840 when their staple food, the potato, is caught in a blight and rots in the ground. Rent couldn't be paid, estates were transferred to new owners, and roughly 1 million people died of starvation and fever. Those that did survive, millions fled abroad to escape that famine and poverty. And this became known as the Great Potato Famine.
So I've read a little bit about this, and the things you kind of graph is it's a agricultural and environmental failure. But there was much more to it than that, wasn't there? It was very much an English policy that could have intervened to help people, but actually still took the potatoes that were there to feed British, I guess, people. So the element of the famine, you would think of it as a natural tragedy, but actually it's very much a human tragedy of choice by the English and the British. And that is another one of those things where Ireland's, frankly, terrible treatment at the hands of the British is again glossed over because you think, just failed crops. But it wasn't just failed crops. It was the failure to provision any kind of alternative or even allow those potatoes that were there to be eaten by the people. They were still taken away and sold. The Irish remember, though. I've met a few, and they remember.
Yeah, and quite right too. Prior to the Great Potato Famine, 8 million people living in Ireland. Today, 5 million, as we've discussed. So still feeling that impact.
I mean, that's astonishing, isn't it? An event that just so massively changes everything, really.
Yeah. And of course, that's what we were talking about where we were saying about the Irish population in America, 40 million people that claim to have Irish ancestry in America. And that's because a lot of them emigrated there as part of the famine. Anyway, so 1911, Ireland's population is sort of half at this point what it was just 50 years before.
Imagine if half the people you knew weren't there anymore.
It would be a significant loss, wouldn't it?
Crazy.
Yeah. 1916, which is the end of our time period, but that sees the Easter Rising, which is the Irish Republican Brotherhood. They seize government buildings in Dublin, and their insurrection lasts just 5 days, but it kickstarts this vigorous campaign for Irish home rule. Negotiations then start to happen between Sinn Féin, the major Irish party at the time, and the UK government, and the Anglo-Irish Treaty is signed, which succeeds 5/6 of Ireland from the UK. In 1949, legislation enables Irish home rule, finally being passed, abolishes the monarchy from Ireland and makes the country a republic with a presidency, which is kind of where we are today. But that leads into a whole troubled part of the mid to late 20th century, and even to today, with a lot of conversations still ongoing about the UK's role in Northern Ireland.
And there's kind of another consistent thread, isn't there, in Irish life, which, as you said at the start, very early on, there was this extensive monastic tradition and religious presence in all of society, and that is still the case today, isn't it? There's always been that continuous church element in Ireland as well.
No, you're absolutely right, and that is a huge part. And I have glossed over the whole Protestant versus Catholic thing only because we're talking about mountains today and not going through the whole history of Ireland. But let's talk about the Age of Imperialism, which is the time period 1800 to 1916. Well, actually, it's not strictly true. I think the Durs later got that slightly wrong. Imperialism goes back much further than 1800, but that's kind of like the new period of imperialism. We'll talk a little bit about that. So the 1800s is a period of major change across Europe, but also the world. And there are a number of factors that sort of influence that change, like the Industrial Revolution is happening around that time, and nationalism. But perhaps even more so than that is imperialism. And by imperialism, we mean the domination of one country by people over another group of people. And so the age of imperialism starts around the 1500s. We talk about that often in our episodes, with the Portuguese landing here and the English landing there and, saying hello to the locals. That's kind of where imperialism begins. And that's often due to a lot of those European major nations wanting to start trade routes with the Far East, undergoing explorations in the New World, creating settlements in North, South America, Southeast Asia, Africa, China, basically expanding around the globe.
I mean, in a sense, it's the start of globalization, isn't it? It's, however willingly or otherwise, for the people on the other end of it.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because it kind of starts out essentially around trade, but they're limited in the 1500s by how much they can carry. They're in their little wooden ships, how many men they can take, because there's only so much resources they can take.
And once you've got a hold full of nutmeg, you're done, right?
And you're kind of done, right? You're like, yeah, what more can you do? So in that period, it was more about sort of creating working relationships with local rulers, but their influence is ultimately kind of limited by how many people they can take, how much they can store in their hold, and so on. But by the 1800s, things start to shift, and we enter sort of an age of new imperialism, where Europeans are beginning to sort of more aggressively establish bigger, vaster empires. And they're able to do that through the shift in pace due to technology, science, industry, allowing for sort of things like steel production. So you're able to create bigger, more robust ships and transportation, the development of the railroad, internal combustion engine, electrical power. All of these things means that the ability to land and expand gives the Europeans this intense period of superiority over what they saw as their backward global neighbors. So this wasn't just turning up and, hey, would you like to trade this for that? It's, we're just going to take this, just through their might and strength. By 1914, in fact, Great Britain now controls the largest number of colonies in the world. The saying was, the sun never sets on the British Empire. And when you think about it, that actually does describe the vastness of their global reach, was that wherever you were, the sun never set on Britain.
Well, it was insane, wasn't it? The amount of the world that was under the influence of this tiny island, really, relatively. If you look at it on a map, you go, well, that's mad that little place had this reach, but I guess that's technology in action, isn't it?
It is. But, well, obviously it wasn't just the United Kingdom. It was also Spain. They colonized much of Central and South America. France had Louisiana and French Guinea. Holland built an entire empire in the Indies. So, everyone was kind of having a go. So that's the time period. That's the period that we're looking at. There's a lot happening in 1800 to 1916.
Well, it is a solid century and quite a changeful one as well.
Congratulations, your country has been selected as the newest member of the British Empire. What is that, you might ask? Put simply, it's a club, with benefits, like trade. Say goodbye to old-fashioned methods of money in return for goods and services. Forget the tedious task of invoicing and chasing down payment, because there won't be any payment. They're Britain's goods now. Bid farewell to the hassle of worshipping all those hilarious gods of your hokey religions. Instead, just direct your awe and reverence to one easy-to-manage recipient, your new queen. Feel your breasts swell with pride as this magnificent woman heads up your pathetically queenless country. Isn't that better? Obviously, the Queen will not be visiting your country, but you can see her for yourself at any time by looking at the stamps we will be happy to sell you at a modest price. But that's not all. As a British territory, you will also receive a network of railways, making transport across your country an absolute breeze. Eligibility to travel by this new and exciting network applies to all of your coal, iron, minerals and resources on their journey out of the country. Of course, you won't be travelling on the train. You'll be busy underground in the mines, enjoying full employment and long hours, all included in your country's membership to the British Empire. And what will it cost, you ask? Quite simply, everything. So, welcome to the British Empire. Enjoy our stay.
Let's talk about mountains. What is a mountain?
A very big hill that's outgrown its hill status.
Outgrown it? Yeah. Nice. It's an adult hill, is what you're saying. It's gone beyond hill puberty.
Exactly.
Okay, there is no consensus, is the answer, on the definition of a mountain. It means different things to different people. Across the globe, everyone has a different definition of what a mountain is. And there's a lot of things to consider. I just thought you measure it, and if it's above a certain height, it's a mountain. And that's kind of true, but it's also not true, because you can look at elevation, prominence. So prominence is, imagine a lump in the landscape.
Yes.
All right. On that lump is two lumps.
Yes.
One is higher than the other.
Okay.
Right? One is more prominent than the other one.
Right.
Depending on how close those little lumps on the big lump are, is it considered still part of the overall lump, or are they two separate prominences, or is it like one big thing? So you measure from the highest prominence to the second highest prominence, and depending on the distance between those, you can blah, 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 blah.
Two mountains or one.
Indeed.
Gotcha.
Right. So that's kind of what prominence means. And so you measure elevation versus your prominence. You've then got isolation. Is it on its own in the middle of nowhere? Like, if so, what are you measuring it against?
I guess that's a good point, because you could have very flat land that's very high above sea level, and nobody would say that's a mountain, would they?
Right.
They'd just say that's some flat land.
It's just flat. You're just really high
sea
up.
level.
Exactly. Yeah. Location, and so on and so on. So there's a lot of factors that go into establishing whether a lump of land is a mountain or not. So anyway, point is, there's a lot of factors to consider. But in general, there are just two measures which are considered. And that is the full height at the peak. But then you've also got the height of the prominence as well, right? The height of the summit relative to other nearby summits. So those are the two things that kind of come into effect. In fact, there are so many different various categories and lists that are unique to each country that they could kind of fit into different combinations. So within Ireland, there is a firth, which is a height of over 3,000 feet. There is a real Munro, which is a firth, but with a prominence of over 150 meters. So it's over 3,000 feet, but it's higher than its nearest peak by 150. Then there's the P600, which are known as the majors. So within the British Isles, it's a peak of any height with prominence over 600 meters. Then there's the Marilyn, a British Isles peak of any height with a prominence of over 150 meters. Then you've got a Hewitt, which is a peak of over 2,000 feet. Then there's the P600, which are known as the majors. So within the British Isles, it's a peak of any height with prominence of over 600 meters. Then there's the Marilyn, British Isles peak of any height with a prominence of over 150 metres. Then you've got a Hewitt, which is a peak of over 2,000 feet. Then there's the Marilyn, 610 metres, with a prominence of over 30 metres. Then you've got the Vandeleur Linehan, with a peak of over 600 metres, with a prominence of over 15 metres. And then you've got the Arderin, and then you've got the mountain views, and the... wait, were you just asleep right now?
No,
Okay. All right, fine. Well, I guess I'll just carry on. As a rule, though, and as the basis for the official list of 100 highest Irish mountains, the minimum peak for an Irish mountain is 500 metres.
Right.
Measure it from the ground to the peak, 500 metres or higher, it's a mountain. Okay, 1,640 feet. So given the name of that list, you might be led to believe that there are indeed mountains in Ireland. They are relatively low-lying, and they are found mainly around the coastal areas, and those are made of granite. And in the south, they're sandstone, which is slightly less strong.
I feel like they'd be being worn down quickly.
Yeah, two huge supercontinents about 450 million years ago slammed together and they've created Ireland. And at one point around this time, when Ireland was at the time then below the equator, the mountains were much larger than they were today, right? Because they erode over time due to weather and other natural things like glaciers and such. But it's said that they were so tall, they were even taller than Mount Everest today, which is the largest mountain on Earth. Perhaps more than 8,000 meters high.
Wow.
These mountains in Ireland. But they've just eroded away
Scoured
over
down
the years.
to a stub.
Yeah, particularly the ones in the south, which are sandstone, right? It's much easier for them to just erode. The top 3 mountains in Ireland, I hear you ask me. What are they, Ryan?
What are those top 3 mountains in Ireland, Ryan?
Yeah.
That I've heard so much about.
Right. Okay, so number 1 is Currantahill. Now, again, I'm not pronouncing this right. And it has a height of 1,038.6 meters. That's 3,407 feet. So quite high.
But broadly, put this in human terms, right? This is something that you and I could walk up in a day and back, or we would need to get our crampons on and start hacking up the snowy surface.
You could walk up it. Yeah, I mean, there are different routes up many mountains, right? So most mountains will have several different routes of different levels of severity. You can walk up Currantahill. It would probably take us about 8 hours to get up there and back again.
Wouldn't need oxygen or a tent, though. I could just take a picnic basket and we'd be all right.
You're not going to need ice axes
Okay.
on Currantahill.
Another
Depending on the weather.
purchase.
Depending on the weather. I am assured, though, that it is still a tough journey, and that's more to do with sort of the weather, I think, more than anything else. It's right by the coast, and so very windy, very rainy, and very cold.
I would suggest if you can endure the Ryanair flight to get near to the mountain, you can endure the walk up the mountain.
Very true. Then number 2 is Knocknapiasta. Again, really apologies about the language.
If I might
Knocknapiasta.
interject briefly on the language, Irish in particular has a very loose relationship between the spelling and one's natural instinct for speaking out loud. So I feel you on this, because having known many people with Irish names and the spelling and the speaking of those being wildly different to what I would expect from my cultural background, I think you've got no hope. So
No, I don't have any hope. And so that's why I'm just apologising. And that's it, really. That's all that can be done. So yeah, Knocknapiasta, 988 metres. And then you've got number 3, Brandon. Mount Brandon at 952 metres.
Mount Brandon.
Brandon, yeah. So Currantahill means Tuthal's sickle.
Ooh, that sounds exciting.
Yeah, I looked it up. And why a sickle? I guess the ridges are shaped like that, kind of like got that serrated edge. Knocknapiasta means hill of the serpent.
Is it a long wiggly hill?
Yeah, I guess so, yeah. It looks a bit like it. And then you've got Brandon, which just means Brendan's hill.
Brendan.
That's what it means.
Brendan's like, this is my hill. I was like, well, I guess you got here first.
Yeah, and why he called it a hill and not a mountain, obviously he wasn't doing his maths. Other notable mountain names in Ireland, though, Tuthal's sickle, Hill of the Serpent. You can see how like people look at these things and see images and
shape like a
shapes
cloud.
in them. Right? You can exactly. You see images in it and you're like, that's what we should call it, because then I can tell other people, I was near the mountain that looked like a bundle of snakes, and people are like, oh, the bundle of snake mountain. Yeah, it does look like that. Here's some other names. Hollow of the Wood, Top of the Fang.
Oh, Top of the Fang I like. Hollow of the Wood didn't sound like a mountain name at all.
No, it sounds like a wood.
Yeah. If anything, a clearing in a wood, not even a wood.
Long-haired Mountain.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, that's a good one. Fork of the Horse.
I now have an image of a horse at a dinner table. That's just confusing to me.
Yeah, I don't know why, but I imagine it's sort of like with its legs all splayed out. I don't know why. Sunny Spot.
Oh, nice.
Rump of the Drum.
Rump of the Drum, nice.
Yeah. Pass of the Bullocks.
Crikey.
Mountain of the Women.
I would like to know more about that one, but carry on.
What about Boggy Area Long Grass?
That feels a little on the nose for me. It's like, come on, guys. What happened to Serpent's Tooth Mountain, you idiots?
What about Mountain of Ants?
What is this, a mountain for ants?
Yeah. The Two Breasts.
Well, I can't. I find it impossible to believe that is the only mountain range where two hills have been called that. But yeah, carry on.
Okay. Well, I mean, I guess that just leaves. That just leaves resemblance of Maeve's vulva.
Maeve, your fame endures. What a lass.
At 678 meters high, the resemblance of Maeve's vulva still stands.
This tells us a lot about Maeve, doesn't it? Because at least two people went, does that look like...
It does look like Maeve.
Look like Maeve. So Maeve...
You know what I'm seeing? I do know what you're seeing. So there you go. The resemblance of Maeve's vulva and Mountain of Ants. We should go climb Maeve's vulva.
I don't know, man. Not sure I can find it.
Side note, one of the oldest remaining traditions in Ireland is called Puck Fair. Bunch of people run up a mountain and they go catch a wild goat.
Wow, that sounds extraordinarily challenging.
Yeah, right. But they do it and they catch it. And this is in the Kerry Mountains, by the way. So they run up there, they catch a goat, they put it in a cage, they bring it down to the town, and then they make it king for 3 days.
Awesome.
And then they release it back up into the mountain.
I'd like a goat king.
Imagine being that goat.
I would live in a house in a nation that had a goat king.
A goat king for 3 days.
Well, if you passes enough good quality legislation in those 3 days, it could last, couldn't it?
What a great festival, Puck Fair. I mean, I feel bad for the goat, but also it's only 3 days and it gets to be king for 3 days.
So that goat goes back to his goat mates and is like, you are not going to believe what happened to me. And they're like, yeah, whatever.
Can you imagine being like
That's like an alien abduction
aliens,
story, isn't it, in the goat world?
Hey, Pete.
Hey, Ryan. Who's your four-legged friend?
The goat.
Well, yeah, obviously.
Well, you know the Irish have that Puck Fair thing, you know, where they make a goat the king.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking we should have our own.
What?
Yeah. Problem is, he says he doesn't want to be a king. He wants to be a mayor.
He said that.
Yeah, listen. Colin, would you rather be a king or a mayor? See?
Ryan, that's just the sound they make.
Well, that's what I thought at first, but check this out. Hey, Colin, where should we go next? Get some food or go for a drink? See? He wants to go to a bar.
Well, that's good enough for me. Excellent idea, Mr. Mayor. Let's go for a drink.
Okay, well, while you're enjoying your Guinness, how about I tell you about some Irish mountain climbers?
Yeah, please do.
Because I guess if there are mountains, someone's going to climb them.
Because they're there.
Exactly. So, there are mountains in 1800 to 1916, but is anyone climbing them? What do you think?
I mean, given that this is the age of imperialism, people were travelling and taking over things and planting flags in all directions, in my opinion, so I suspect it was a golden age of mountain climbing.
Well, it's funny you should use that phrase. Yes, there are people climbing mountains. Are they climbing them in Ireland is the question.
Oh, I mean, as a warm-up, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, basically, this time period isn't ice axe wielding, crampon-laden, Gore-Tex bedecked mountaineers clambering over hillsides like we're perhaps used to today.
Kind of big woolly sweater.
Tweed, a lot of tweed.
Heavy
and wool.
leather shoes.
That's exactly right.
And still wearing a tie.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, for sure. Come on, decorum. In fact, at home in Ireland, the pursuit of mountain climbing and mountain running, running up and down mountains, is much more an act of daring do. It's independently wealthy gentlemen getting together, looking to sort of outdo one another. They're not really taking this very seriously in terms of tackling summits. Like, come on, let's get up there and get to the top, lads. It's more like, I reckon I could just get there faster than you could.
I'll beat you on the mountain.
I'll see you tomorrow and I'll find out.
Maeve, 2 more pints.
Outside of Ireland, though, the Irish are having a much more tangible contribution to mountain exploration, especially in the Alps, which is kind of where all the mountains kind of are.
That is a hotbed of mountains.
In fact, from the 1850s to the early 20th century, the Irish were centrally placed in establishing what is now recognised as the golden age of alpine mountaineering.
I knew it.
Now, sadly, much of that Irish contribution has been ignored or obscured, to put it kindly, by the historical accounts, which were written by guess who?
Is it us?
Yeah, so the Irish are kind of edged to the very far margins of that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that was the case, as we're about to discover. Recent explorations into the history of Irish mountain climbing, such as Frank Nugent's excellent book, In Search of Peaks, Passes and Glaciers, Irish Alpine Pioneers, has revealed that there was a significant Irish contribution at this time. For example, did you know that the first ever ascents of the huge alpine mountains, the Iger, the Weisshorn, the Matterhorn, they were all completed first by Irish climbers?
No way.
Climbers like John Tyndall, famous scientist from Carlow in Ireland, who spent his summers in Switzerland studying glaciers and mountains. He was an expert mountaineer, and he led one of the first teams to reach the top of the Weisshorn in 1861 and the Matterhorn in 1868. Then you're talking about John Ball, MP. He was a politician from Dublin who was the first to climb Mont Pelmo and went on to become the first president of the Alpine Club. So quite well respected. He was also the author of a series of guidebooks which led to sort of the popularization of the sport. So he wrote them in a way which were easily accessible by every level of society, from the common people to the richy rich.
The elite.
The elite, indeed. Then you've got Anthony Adams Riley from Westmeath in Ireland, who produced the first reliable map of Mont Blanc. Then you've got Valentine Ryan from Offaly, who is often considered the finest alpine climber of the early 20th century. So these are just a few of these Irish climbers that haven't been recognised in more recent history as to their achievements. In fact, there are too many of these Irish climbers to talk about just in this podcast. But what I am going to do is just focus on two. And these are, for me, the more notable of these Irish mountaineers. So I'm just going to tell you about those guys.
Do it.
All right. Okay, the first on my list is a chap called Charles Barrington.
If you'd have said, name an Irish mountain climber,
Yeah.
I would never have got to Charles Barrington.
No, you
Doesn't
wouldn't.
sound very Irish at all, does it?
No, it doesn't, no. So, in the heart of the Swiss Bernese Alps is this tiny, picturesque village. And it lies in the shadow of a number of these looming mountains around it. Peaks like the Finsteraarhorn, which is 4,274 metres high, 14,000 feet tall. The Wetterhorn, which is 3,692 metres high, 12,000 feet. You've got the Schreckhorn, 4,078 metres, 13,379 feet high. The Grosse Fleischerhorn, 4,049 metres, 13,284 feet. And the Iger, perhaps its more famous one, exactly, the classic, 3,967 metres high, 13,015 feet tall.
I have in my mind an Irish mountain climber going, well, I've done all the mountains in Ireland, I'm going to go to the Alps, and just arriving and going, oh,
These are big.
it's really different.
So the Iger is the most notable of those mountains. It's probably the one that stood out to you, unless you knew of the Schreckhorn or the Grosse Fleischerhorn.
No, those were new to me, I'll be honest.
Right, so the Iger is most notable because it has this 1,800 metre, bear in mind that's almost twice as high as Currantahill, the largest mountain on Ireland, north face of rock and ice. And it's named the Iger Nordwand, which is the biggest north face in the Alps. What do we mean by the north face? Do you know?
Well, I have heard the expression the north face of the Iger. I'd never heard of just the Iger. It was always the north face of the Iger.
Right.
I thought that was just a particular bit that was a hard climb. I didn't
that
know there was a
faced the
north-facing was a general thing at all.
Yeah, the North Face is an expression. That's right, because I'd heard of that, and I thought just the North Face was the side of the mountain that faced north, right? No, the North Face is the name for the coldest, most unforgiving side of a mountain.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
Indeed. So even the name Iger gives away an impression of how dangerous this mountain is, and particularly the North Face. There are 3 mountains on the same ridge as the Iger. There is the Jungfrau, the Monk, and the Iger. Jungfrau means virgin or maiden. Monk means monk, like a priest. And then there's the Iger, which means ogre. Which sort of gives you an indication as to when they were naming these things, why they might name that one the ogre. So even by 1857, the Iger had remained unclimbed. Many people had tried to climb it. In fact, Europe's most famous mountaineer, a Viennese gentleman called Sigismund Porges, he had attempted to climb the Iger that year, 1857, but had failed, right? He'd managed to get about 2/3 of the way up it before he turned around and came back, just like everyone else before him. So it was no great shame in it. It was just an impossible mountain to climb. But 1 year later, in August 1858, a 24-year-old Irish merchant called Charles Barrington arrives in Grindelwald looking for adventure. Now, let's bear in mind that this 24-year-old Irish merchant had never done any training. He had the most basic of equipment, and he'd never climbed a mountain before. And here he is, just turning up in Grindelwald, this tiny little picturesque village. So he was looking for adventure, as 24-year-olds do. So he sort of spent a few days clambering around these glaciers, sleeping in caves, and his diary talks about sleeping in a little hut on one of the glaciers with a goat herd and his goats, where he says that he was bitten to death with fleas. The next night he had to sleep with like a beef steak on his face just to bring down the swelling. But that was kind of it. That was the most he'd done. So Charles arrives back in Grindelwald 72 hours after leaving for walking around these glaciers, and he's feeling restless, unfulfilled. Like, here's his own words from a letter that he wrote to his brother recounting what happened next. Walked back to Grindelwald. Here I met some Alpine men whose footsteps I had tracked down the glacier. Talking about climbing, I said to them, I did not think much of the work I had done, and was answered, try the Iger or the Matterhorn. All right, I said. In the evening...
All right.
In the evening of the next day, I made a bargain with 2 guides for the Iger. Side note, this is the super experienced Christian Alma and Peter Boren, known locally in Grindelwald as Peterlee, the Wolf of the Glaciers. Mm-hmm. These guys were knowledgeable about the area. He says, I walked up to the hotel, stopped to play cards for an hour on the way, then threw myself on a sofa to sleep. That was his prep. For climbing the Iger. An hour of cards.
I've got to say, I love this guy. I am loving this guy. It's everything I would aspire to be.
Yeah. Gentle reminder, he'd never climbed a mountain before, let alone the most sinister, the most deadly of mountains, the unclimbed, the unclimbable 13,026 feet of Mount Iger.
See, he was too inexperienced to know it was unclimbable, and that was in his favour.
He definitely knew it was unclimbable because everyone was telling him. But he didn't think twice, right? This is him again. We started at 3:30 a.m. for the Iger. We took a flag from the hotel, and when we came to a point where one descends into a small hollow, I looked well with my telescope over the face of the Iger next us, and made up my mind to try the rocks in front, instead of going up the other side, which had been tried twice before unsuccessfully. Alma and Boren, his guides, said it was no use, and declined to come the way I wished. All right, I said, you may stay, I will try. So off I went for about 300 or 400 yards over some smooth rocks to the part which was almost perpendicular. I then shouted and waved the flag for them to come on, and after 5 minutes they followed and came up to me. They said it was impossible. I said, I will try. So, with the rope coiled over my shoulders, I scrambled up, sticking like a cat to the rocks, which cut my fingers, and at last got up, say, 50 to 60 feet. I then lowered the rope, and the guides followed with its assistance. So, this inexperienced Irishman is now leading the expert guides up the Iger himself, right, showing them the way. This is him again. We then had to mark our way with chalk and small bits of stone, fearing that we might not be able to find it on our return. Because it's all very well getting to the top, but then you got to get back, right? We went very close to the edge, looking down on Grindelwald, sometimes throwing over large stones just to hear them crash down beneath the clouds.
Well, you got to have fun when you're doing it.
Yeah. We got to the top. The two guides gave me the place of first man up, stayed about 10 minutes, fearing the weather, and came down in 4 hours, avoiding the very steep place and saving ourselves by a few seconds from an avalanche. So they made it. The ogre had been conquered.
I like the avalanche was just a side, like, oh yeah, and also just missed an avalanche. But the most important thing, beef for tea.
Right, beef for tea, exactly. So he was met at the bottom by about 30 people from Grindelwald. They all ran out to see them. And he says that they went up to the hotel. They doubted we had been on the top until the telescope disclosed the flag there. No one believed they'd made it. The hotel proprietor immediately let off a large gun, and I seemed for the evening to be a lion.
Nice.
That was his
okay, there were
word.
so many bits of that story that I enjoyed. Number one, he didn't even bring his own flag. He's gone to the hotel and said, you guys got a flag I can borrow?
It's quite amazing.
That
isn't
is
it?
almost, I love the cinematic moment, like, now, come on. And then they stretch out the telescope and they look up and there it is, flapping in the breeze at the top of the mountain.
You'd think that the word of the
the two other guys, yeah, you'd
would have
think.
been sufficient, but even they, like, I mean, it just goes to show how impossible they felt that climbing the Iger was. And there he is, just done it in a day. Whatever. Anyway, so in the glow of this success, Charles Barrington then has to consider what to do next. Well, in his letter, he says, not having enough money with me to try the Matterhorn, which he wanted to do next, I went home. Thus ended my first and only visit to Switzerland. That's it. And he did. He went home. He never climbed again. He just
As careers go, that's pretty unbeatable, isn't it?
right, just sign off on that.
First one up the Iger, North Face, done that.
Drop
that'll
mic.
do.
Yeah. So what did he do? Well, he just lived quietly in Fassaro in Ireland. He made the local headlines only once more in 1870 when he trained a racehorse,
To climb a mountain.
and won the Irish Grand National with it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And also in 1870, he donated a gold watch for a race up and down the Sugarloaf Mountain in Ireland, which was a competition won by a guy called Tom Hill in the first ever race. But it was revived in 2006 by Charles's great-great-grandson. As far as I'm aware, still going. Barrington died on April 20th, 1901, and was buried simply as a merchant. His legacy of being the first to conquer the Iger kind of not lost, but just not really spoken about.
That is a fantastic story.
Right. So to this day, Barrington is still spoken of with huge respect in Grindelwald. And in fact, on the 150th anniversary of Charles's victory over the ogre, a joint celebration was planned between the Swiss village and Charles's family. The special event was marked by the erection of 2 memorials and a recreation of the original ascent featuring 2 climbers from the Mountaineering Council of Ireland. Michael Crawley and his climbing partner, Niamh Burke, they tackled the climb together, saying at the time that it is through people like Charles that my generation has these opportunities to explore and achieve what may seem impossible. How inspirational is that? So I got to speak to Michael Crawley and I started to ask him just about his background as a mountaineer, and this is what he had to say.
No way. This is awesome.
I suppose I'd have to go back to when I was a teenager and used to stare out the window just dreaming of going on adventures. And, I've been lucky in my life to be able to go off to different places, and I've met the most amazing people and where they've brought me. But I suppose consciously, my first mountain was, believe it or not, in the southwest of Ireland, a small place called Cahersaveen. And its mountain's name is called Cnoch na Dobar. And as I stood at the top of this mountain, I just went, wow, this is just magical, to be able to go up a mountain and in some ways to have a profession, which is, I find astonishing that somebody wants to pay you to climb up a mountain with them. But they do. And thankfully, I've been able to try turn that into a livelihood for myself. For me, it's like any mountain. I've never climbed mountains to conquer a mountain. For me, it's the whole experience. It's about meeting the people, seeing the cultures, understanding what foods they have and how they look at the mountain, and to be very respectful of it. And it's a wonderful experience. For me, the happiest moments, I think, in my life are being stuck on the side of a mountain and all you hear is wind, or a robin will arrive up beside you and at such a height, and you're just going, how is this possible? And, you're at one, for me, I know it sounds like a cliche, at one with nature, but you really are. You have no noise, no traffic, no Facebook, no social media at you. It's just you on the mountain. I find that very reassuring. And I'm probably giving this lovely image that it's always easy, but it's not. There is the other elements. Probably my favorite, and it's one that I'll probably say it to you now, but I'll also say to listeners, don't try this. But I climbed a volcano while it was erupting with 5 other people, and that was probably the most stupid thing you could do in your life. But at the same time, it was the most incredible thing I've ever seen, to see. And I was good, maybe half a kilometer, 500 meters away from the actual lava rolling down the mountain. But to feel the earth shaking underneath you and to see the lava at nighttime rolling down the mountain. Now, I was with 5 other Guatemalans who hadn't a clue what they were doing, and all they had was tequila and marijuana to keep them going. So that was the other dangerous part of the journey.
Spirit of Barrington lives.
Amazing, right?
That was remarkable.
He's truly inspirational. I just love talking with Michael, and I'm really grateful that he gave us his time to sort of tell us about this. I found him just also, what a voice.
Oh yeah, it was great.
Just sit there and listen to that
couldn't
hours.
you? Like lovely warm caramel voice.
Yeah.
I have to say that this sort of triggers something in me, which is that there is something about the pursuit of mountain climbing because of its pointlessness. And I don't mean that as a negative. What I mean is there is no resource to be plundered. There is no profit to be had. It is simply a thing to do. There's something kind of pure about that desire to just get to the top of something. You're not going to come away with a nugget of gold. You're not going to. There's nothing in it for you, really.
Yeah, there is a sense that we all share, I think, which is purpose and like, what are we here for? Like, what is it about? And I think that it tickles sort of that box of purpose, of like, achievement, of having set out to face a challenge and overcome it.
Yeah, and I have it's a very minor version of it, but whenever I go anywhere, I like to get into the highest part of whatever it is. If it's the tallest building in the town, or if there's a hill, Arthur's Seat in Edinburgh, whatever it is. Whenever I go anywhere, I like to get to the highest bit of it.
Yeah.
And if there's ever any water, I want to touch the water.
Oh, okay.
And those are just like 2 things that make me feel like I've engaged with the extremes, if you like, of the location.
That's wonderful. Well, look, I asked him about the climb and how he got involved, and this is what Michael had to say.
I was basically called up by a friend, and I'll be honest, I was very ignorant to what Charles achieved, and my friend, who was part of the Mountaineering Ireland at the time, Mountaineering Council of Ireland, it was called then, knew I was heading over to Switzerland to climb the Matterhorn, and said, "Would you mind climbing the Iger as well, Michael, while you're over there?" And he explained the kind of the background to us. And I said, of course. And so that's the moment when I started reading up on Charles, and quite an amazing achievement in that era. But I suppose Charles was the kind of a person who, he liked the challenge. And if somebody told him you couldn't do it, he'd find a way of doing it. So he was a very determined individual. The family of the 2 guides, they weren't happy. And they actually accosted Charles Barrington before they began the climb, saying, "What are you doing? Why are you taking our sons up here, or my husband up here? They're going to die." But it shows you how determined he was to get up to the top. And I'm sure the guides as well, they really wanted to be able to say, we were the first ones to climb the Iger. If you can imagine in 1858, so equipment-wise, it wasn't mind-bodily, fantastic. It was, you wearing a tweed jacket, tweed trousers. You'd have boots with kind of nails kind of hammered into the bottom of them to give you grip, and then a bit of rope, and a rope that wasn't, flexible at all. It wasn't elasticated. So if you fell on that, you were virtually breaking your back. It was quite a harrowing ordeal in some ways. And then part of all that was it was 150 years to commemorate Charles' achievement. But it wasn't really until I met his descendants, really, and I realized, wow, he was an absolutely mad character altogether. But he probably had to be, in terms of what he achieved.
So then I asked him, he was mentioning about some of the dangers of it, and I asked him whether he was aware of the dangers for his own climb, and this is what he had to say.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. You're always aware, but at the same time, you're driven by a young male testosterone, thinking, "Yeah, I can do this, no problem at all." But you're acutely aware, and I've been trained, by the best. That classic saying, is if you fail to prepare, prepare to fail. So we had all our work done and everything, but things crop up, and you just have to deal with them, and we did deal with them. I don't really get phased. I having Niamh there, believe it or not, that was my focus, was making sure she stayed alive. There was moments there she was so cold, so tired, because it was a long day, that she felt, okay, we could stay at the top of the mountain, but I knew if we stayed at the top, that was it. We would be goners. So, like, I would look upon what I was doing as, okay, it's seen as a dangerous activity, etc. But as we climbed the Iger there, I saw a gentleman ski down the side of it, but he also had a parasol, a kite with him. So he was kiting down it. And to see him, and he'd launch off the Iger and use the wind, and he would drag himself back in, and he'd land on the mountain again. So that put it into perspective in terms of what I was doing, in terms of danger.
So that's about the danger. So
I think we need to take a moment at this point, Ryan, to ponder the perils of podcasting, our chosen hobby.
Yeah.
As we hear, he's risked his life.
Right.
He could die at any moment.
Yeah.
And I feel that has a lot of parallels with the art of podcasting.
It is.
At any time, I could say something silly.
Yeah.
And you'd have to edit that out later.
Yeah. Like this bit.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you meant because we record on the 10th floor of a building. I thought that was the height equivalent.
Yes.
You have to get a lift.
It's high altitude podcasting. It's a real adrenaline rush.
So then anyway, so I asked Michael about the actual ascent. And this is what he had to say.
When we started was really early in the morning. We got up, and I suppose to set the tone, as myself and Niamh, my climbing partner, we were there packing up our tent and brushing our teeth. All of a sudden, I could hear this rumbling coming from the mountain, and literally a foot away from Niamh's head, a rock came flying past and missed her. And I said to Niamh, okay, let's get going. So we quickly set upon going, and it was a long day. It was an amazing experience, but things happened along the way that you didn't plan for. All the best plans in the world, you can plan, you can look at books, you can, map out your route, and which we did. But unfortunately for Niamh, this was kind of really one of her first experiences in something this extreme. Now, we had been over on the Matterhorn, but it was quite a daunting mountain, and virtually we met nobody on the Iger, which was quite amazing. It should only take around about, maybe, if you were fast moving, etc., maybe between 13 to 15 hours. It took us about 22 hours. As we were going up the mountain, the Barrington family was quite one of my favorite moments, and it was I couldn't resist not going out onto the north face. So as we're going up, and the west flank basically goes up along, and you have the north face to your left hand side. So as I creeped on the outside of it, just to say I've done a tiny bit on the north face, I had been informed by my friend who's part of the Mountaineer in Ireland, Mick, that you're going to get a phone call. It could be CNN. You're going to have to answer this call. So the phone rings, and I go, shit, I have to answer this. So I made myself safe. I locked into the snow, and I gingerly took my phone out to answer what I thought would be CNN. But it was actually the Barrington family. They were down below looking through a telescope, and they were saying, Mick, we can see you. Oh, this is amazing. We can see you. And I had to say, that's great, Ron. Fantastic. I'm just hanging on the side of the mountain here. Can I call you back in a little bit? And he says, yeah, I can see you. You're there in the red jacket. And I go, Ron, I'm wearing a blue jacket. It was somebody else you're focused on. So I hung up, put my phone away, and continued up this little section of the north face, and then got to the top. Yes, thank you, Rod.
So then I asked about the moment that they reached the top, him and Niamh.
Yeah, we had a flag, an Irish flag, but in those days, I suppose I will say is camera technology wasn't great on mobile phones. We did take a picture, but I don't think it came out too well. But it is proof that we were there. No, we took out the Irish flag. And I suppose for me, it was a moment where we said, to Charles, and then I was acutely aware of time-wise as well, that we had to get going. So there was a tiny little bit of celebration. It was a pleasure for me to climb the Iger, not because of just climbing the mountain, but to represent Ron's family and what it meant to them. They were very emotional when I came down, and so appreciative of what I did in memory of their how would you say, Charles, their ancestor. And so it was a privilege.
So you heard there that Michael and Niamh raised the Irish flag on top of the Iger once they reached the top. So I thought I'd use that as an opportunity to ask Michael if he felt that Charles's plucky attitude was especially Irish in any way. Did he think that attitude that he had of go get it, I'm just going to go up there, was that an especially Irish trait? And this was his response.
To be honest, we can say different things about countries and what nationality, etc. But for me, there's just so many amazing human beings out there. And for me, I don't look at them, where are you from? What's your country? For me, you see it in their eyes, why they do the mountain. For me, mountains have no idea where you're from. They're just, they're probably, I hope, happy that you're on top of them, looking out over this amazing scenery.
I'm going to cry. Isn't that an amazing response?
That's great. Oh,
we're both sitting here. I know. We're both sort of sitting there with our eyes like watering.
Another way of looking at it is the mountain doesn't care where you're from when it kills you.
When it throws you off its side or it throws a rock at your head. Yes, that's very true. And so finally, as with all of our guests on HHE podcast, I asked Michael if he had anything that he'd like to promote, any books or, audio books. I'd be quite happy to buy one of those. And
sleep tape.
And this was his response.
The only thing I'll say to you is try and promote and tell people to go outdoors. Go climb mountains. Go get inspired. Take the moment out to be happy. And definitely mountains or whatever adventure you do, that's achieves it. So there you go. That's my promotion for you.
What a guy.
What a guy.
What a guy. Michael Crawley, everyone. So yeah, there you go. That is the story of the man who was clothed in tweed with his hobnail boots and 30 feet of rope, no experience, who went and did the impossible.
That was remarkable. There's so much going on there. That was incredible. Oh, hello, sir. Welcome to Savile Row Tailors, and how can I help, sir, today?
Hello, yes. Well, I'm in need of an outfit. I'm going to climb the north face of the Iger. What?
Ah, the Iger. Good for sir. Well, first things first, sir is going to need the right footwear. And for a mountain of that magnitude, we would always suggest an oxblood brogue. In a wide fit, secured with a waxed cotton lace.
Oh, just look how smooth that sole is.
Like butter, sir.
Indeed.
And it's going to be cold, sir, so with the classic Harris tweed, that is a must.
Oh, of course, yes.
Now, I'm thinking a blue herringbone with, of course, a 3-button front and, dare I say, double vented at the back.
You may dare.
Very good, sir.
And what about avalanches? I hear they can be quite the palaver.
Well, in the case of thousands of tons of snow crashing relentlessly down the mountainside, you will need to be equipped, sir. And we always suggest a simple ascot is the way to go. Alternatively, if sir is of the more modern persuasion, perhaps a day cravat? Provided, of course, that sir was not planning on climbing into the evening.
Well, I must say, this all sounds rather splendid.
Excellent. So, let's get sir measured up, shall we? And would sir like to be fitted for a casket too?
Well, I'm probably going to need it, aren't I?
Very likely, sir. Very likely.
And finally, I couldn't leave it there, because this has been a bit of a sausage party, isn't it? It's been a lot of men mountain climbers. Surely there weren't women mountain climbers in the 1800s. So, before we leave this episode, I want to tell you about one final mountaineer. It is a woman. A woman by the name of Elizabeth Hawkins-Whitshed, also known as Mrs. Aubrey LeBlonde, also known as Lizzie LeBlonde.
Lizzie LeBlonde, that's a great name.
It is pretty cool. So this is an Irish pioneer of mountaineering at a time when it was almost unheard of for a woman to climb mountains. So born into an upper-class family, she was the daughter of Captain Sir St. Vincent Hawkins-Whitshed, 3rd Baronet.
His business cards are like 30 centimetres long, aren't they?
Just a ruler. Yeah, and she was related to the Dukes of Portland, so she entered into a family of wealth. She grew up in the southeast of Ireland, but when her father died, leaving no other children, the Lord Chancellor took her on as his ward.
As they do.
As they do. She moved to London. She married and she had a child. During this time, she developed lung complaint, and so she started to do some research on what would be best to help her with her breathing. And one of the things that she discovered was getting fresh air. So one of the things that she discovered was that the Alps had like all this incredibly fresh air. So she abandoned her London social life and she moved to Switzerland, where she learned to climb mountains, getting 2/3 of the way up Mont Blanc on her first ever climb. Sadly, she became best known by the public for photos taken of her while she was climbing dressed in a skirt, which caused a huge scandal in London. Her great aunt wrote about her in the paper, as family should do, saying, "Stop her climbing mountains." That's what it says. She is scandalizing. She is scandalizing all of London and looks like a Red Indian.
Wow. There's so much to unpack in all of that. None of it good.
Yeah, thanks, grand aunt. Anyway.
That's how I deal with all of my family issues. Letter to the Times every time. My niece is acting in an unbecoming manner.
Stop the unbecoming manner. Anyway, she didn't want to cause offence. It was easier to climb in skirts. There's a lot more movement and flexibility in a skirt than there is in wearing a tight pair of trousers. Anyway, all of the controversy was a shame because what it did is it threatened to sort of nullify the huge successes that she was actually having throughout her life, right? This was something that carried through everything that she did. Let me tell you a little about those successes. So, Lizzie LeBlonde, she conquered Mont Blanc twice. She conquered, in fact, over 100 ascents, of which 20 no one had ever climbed. So there's Charles Barrington doing the Iger once. She did 20 mountains that no one had ever climbed before.
Poppy, she had to buy flags in bulk, I would imagine.
She explored the Norwegian Arctic and mapped uncharted territory there. She wrote 69 books, 7 of which were on mountain climbing. She always carried her camera with her, capturing views which had never been seen before, as you can imagine. She published over 400 of these photos in various publications around the world. She developed and printed her own work, often in terrible conditions up mountains, and she sold them in aid of charity or gave them as gifts and prizes at like mountaineering events. Unfortunately, side note, much of the photography has been lost. I think there's like one collection in a museum somewhere, which is such a shame. But not content with still images, Elizabeth then went ahead and became one of the world's first female filmmakers, making and producing 10 documentaries of her alpine adventures, covering topics like tobogganing and ice hockey, which is amazing when you think this is like 1860, 1870. And then, when climbing became kind of too physically exhausting for her, she formed the Ladies Alpine Club. And we talked about the Alpine Club earlier, which was like the British gentleman's club. So she created an alternative to the male-only Alpine Club, and she became its first president, and she oversaw the gradual and begrudging acceptance and eventual merger of the two clubs. So the clubs now accept lady members as well. So look, to me, I think Lizzie LeBlonde was and still is a genuine heroic role model.
Or trailblazer.
A trailblazer. She showed real courage throughout her entire life. She provided the inspiration to future generations that, that may have avoided taking part in sort of like these male-dominated activities. She died on the 27th of July, 1934, and she is buried at Brompton Cemetery in London.
Well, the common factor here is people who would not be told that things couldn't or shouldn't be done. And you have to admire these people who will not be constrained.
There's something to be admired about those people that just go, you know what, I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah, speaking as somebody who is easily discouraged in many ways, I find people who just go, no, I'm going to do that. Well, just because no one's ever done it before, I'd be there going, well, no, it seems hard, right? And then these people go, well, no, this doesn't apply to me. I'm going to be the one that does it. And they are. And I find that really ridiculously inspiring and impressive.
It is. And you know, the metaphor of climbing a mountain and overcoming that obstacle, I think fits both of those characters so vividly. And when you think of the obstacles that the Irish were facing at the time.
Well, even within that, there's a sense
an inspiration.
Of everybody has their constraints, right? You might be a super posh, super rich lady, but your constraint is ladies don't climb mountains. So
Correct.
Everybody has their barriers and their walls that need to be broken down or overcome.
Right. And not just doing it for yourself, but giving that sense of purpose and direction for others.
Absolutely. Once a thing's been achieved, it's no longer unachievable. And
You've opened
suddenly
a door.
I could do that.
So there you go. That is Mountain in Ireland during 1800 to 1916.
I thought that was some excellent stories, some excellent people, stuff that you just don't hear about. I thought that was absolutely fabulous, and I was thoroughly inspired and moved throughout, actually.
Yay!
Yay, indeed.
All right, well, it turns to you, my friend.
It does.
The eyes of the HHE audience shift in the dark in your direction. Expectantly.
That's okay. But
So-
I need to interject before we run the Does Later.
Oh, I was just about to get it out.
I need to observe that
Yeah.
we are bearing down upon the Christmas season.
Do you know what? All I want for Christmas is a Christmas-based podcast.
Well, is such a thing even possible, though?
It is, yeah. Because you know what? Yeah. You know how like we have the Halloween spookulator?
Yes.
Well, we have the Christmas
Festivate.
I love it. The Festivator. All right, and look, here it
Look
is.
now on its little gingerbread wheels, little candy cane lever. Oh, it's amazing.
All right, here it is. What do you think?
I love it. It looks a highly
Green and red and white.
I mean, it looks edible almost. So many lights.
Okay. I love it. This is my favourite of all of the elaters.
The festivalator.
Okay, right. Here we go.
Here we go.
I'm going to pull the lever.
All right, do it.
All right. Listen to these Christmas bells. Peter,
That's right.
your country is... Wild card.
Oh, that's one of my favourite countries.
Yeah, that's my gift to you. Well, it's the festivalator's gift to you.
All
So you
right.
get to the wild card premise is that you get to pick the country, but the rule is you have to pick at the very end.
After I've heard what the other categories are, and I get a minute to decide.
Yeah, correct.
All
So,
right.
all right, let's find out what your time period is.
Okay.
And your time period is... Free America, 1776 to present.
Oh, that's good long period. That's got a lot of potential.
Okay, well then now to the Christmas-related topic. Here we go. Come on, Festivalator, give him something good.
Okay, I'm feeling it.
And your festive topic is... Santa Claus.
Santa Claus. Oh, interesting.
I was hoping for Brussels sprouts. I don't know why. That was entered. That was one of the options.
I would have, and honestly, I would have chosen Belgium just as a sort of word association thing.
Okay, so now over to you. You've got 1 minute to decide a country. Oh. You've got country in 1776 to present and Santa Claus. Because you could go obvious here.
I don't want to go obvious. But do I want to go obvious? Ooh. Oh, this is uncomfortable.
You could pick Hawaii.
New Zealand.
Obviously.
I don't know why I've done that.
Santa Claus in New Zealand from 1776 to present. It's too late. It's logged
I
in.
don't know why I did it. I feel regret immediately.
Well, thanks, Festivalator.
Thank you, Festivalator. See you next year.
We should have fed it like cookies and milk and mince pies.
Oh, lovely mince
That's what it
pies.
runs on.
Okay, so on that potentially regrettable decision point, that's our show for the week. I would like to take a moment to again say thank you, Ryan. I really enjoyed those stories. It was great. I love it when we uncover something that's not necessarily hidden. I'm sure people were aware. Obviously, the events happened, but we can bring some focus to something that was largely unknown. So thank you so much for that.
My pleasure.
And thank you, audience, for listening. If you'd like to get in touch about any of the things we've talked about on the show or just want to say hello, reach out to us on social media. You can come to our website, HHEpodcast.com, or you can email us at peteandryan@hhepodcast.com. We'd love to hear from you, and you never know, you might end up featuring on a future show.
Yeah. One way to definitely feature on a future episode is to rate and review us, and you can do that on Apple Podcasts. Your recommendation, it really helps us to sort of help bring the show to new listeners and new people.
If you're a social media person, if you're on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook or Twitter, you can find us. We are at HHE Podcast. Subscribe to that, and we do these 1-minute videos twice a week or so, and they're kind of fun, and you'll get an alert when they go up.
That's right. And we're going to be back again soon with
The Verdict.
We will indeed. In the meantime, if you can't get enough, obviously you can't. There's so much to enjoy. Check out the backpack.
Backpacker.
I was thinking of Dursley, and then the words back passage came into my head. In the meantime, if you can't get enough of the show, check out our back catalogue of episodes, in which you can find in the podcast app, YouTube, or the website, again, hhepodcast.com.
All right.
So, huge thanks to Ryan. That was an excellent episode.
Thank you, Peter.
And that's it. I guess all that's left to say is...
You've been listening to...
History happened everywhere.
Hey, Ryan.
Hey, Pete.
When are you going to get your eating fixed?
I'm not made of money. Put another jumper on.
All right, mate.